Right, I've been thinking about what subject to do, and up until about 5 minutes ago I was going to do a Gillen Creek painting, but I've now decided to do Carreg Cennan. So the Welsh here will be very pleased with that. And I was going to do a quick sketch of what the composition was going to be like. But I've changed my mind because the drawing, I think, is good enough. Can you pass that one, Rosie? That's the one, yeah. So there's a sketch from when I went down to Carreg Cennan. It's a castle over near Llandilo. And if you call yourself an artist, you are not until you've been there. Because it's a great subject. You can go right around. You've got different views from north, south, east, west. And this dramatic sort of outline, which actually is not important. The outline and the detail is not that important. It's the presence of the ruin, if you like, which is on top of a granite, isn't it? A granite outcrop. Yeah. So it rises dramatically out of a sort of a valley. The amazing thing is that you can be driving down towards Carmarthen and you pass it without seeing it. You've got to get off at Llandilo and then on a couple of lanes, and then suddenly there it is. The reason why I've chosen it is because I'm going to try and demonstrate how I get my atmospherics, which, as you can see, it's all about my paintings. First of all, a couple of technical things, which I've probably described before, but I will again. I'm using 90-pound weight Arches rough paper, which is stretched. And as you can see that I've stuck down with, put it in the bath first for a couple of minutes, and then use brown sticky tape, and then staples through the tape and the paper. And the reason why is this. You see? Because this stuff is pretty hopeless these days. I dampen it, and okay, it's stuck down most of the way around, but it's lifted there, and it's lifted there. And as you can see, where the staple is, the paper is trying to shrink, and the staples are actually keeping it in place. Right, I'll come back to this later, because I'll start at the beginning to create the first washes. So we're right, Mark. Naples yellow. Anybody use Naples yellow? Yeah. You've probably heard all this before, have you? And I'm not going to worry where the castle is going to be or where the trees are going to be. I'm just going to create whatever happens. You know, it's all sheer luck. Now there's going to be after about 10 or 15 minutes, you can all have a wander around, because it'll take 5 minutes to dry this off with a hairdryer. And then I'll do the next part of the job. Now, I'm not actually getting Naples yellow all over. It's just here and there. Why do I use Naples yellow? Partly to get started, but I find it's quite a nice luminous sort of a base colour. Now, this is a bit of cobalt blue, which has been here for about 3 years, actually. Now, I don't know what this is going to do, and as it works on its own, I'm going to take advantage of anything that works quite nicely, put it that way. Incidentally, the line across there is because I was going to do Gillen Creek, so now I've changed my mind. That was going to be the horizon, so I've got to ignore that. So What I'm trying to avoid is having great washes of just one colour. I'm going to vary the sky in different strengths. So cobalt blue again, and you see already it's taken up a couple of edges here, which suggest cloud and so on. So if that works, then fine, I'll keep it. But there's no guarantee it'll stay there, because by the time I've put some more on, it'll change again. So you've got to go with the flow, as they say. By the way, this is a big painting which I'm hoping to get done by about 12, so it's going to be a fair rush. Back to a bit of Naples yellow. And now I've got some neutral tint here, which I'm mixing with cobalt. And this will intensify. I think I might just... If I stop talking, it's because I'm trying to concentrate. Now, I think Carreg Cennan is dramatic on its own, but it's even more dramatic when you've got a sky which is broken, and a cloud, possibly rain cloud moving in. Usually from the west.
Sideways with rain.
Now we've lost that bit of cloud, but still. Right, I think we'll have a little bit of warmth. So, got a little bit of alizarin mixed in with this Naples. As I run some water along here, it's pushing the colour up. Incidentally, I don't normally work like this. It's tilted my way, but because you were watching, I've tilted it that way, so I'd forgot to mention that. Right, I'm going to let that bite in, and I'm going to get the hairdryer on it. I can see there's a couple of dried patches, which gives me the opportunity to keep a couple of quite light areas. I'm going to be a little bit more dramatic with the sky now, and then I'll start on the foreground. Now, I wouldn't do it that way around usually, but for the sake of time, so while that is drying, I can get on with the foreground. So, to be a bit more dramatic, I'm going to use neutral tint.
What is that? Neutral tint?
The question I can never answer. You can buy tubes of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a mixture of two colours, and I can never remember what they are. It's possibly ultramarine and something. But what it is, it's I describe it as a quiet colour. It's great for shadows, for just giving an indication of 3 dimensions, I suppose you can say. And it's also a good colour to, for instance, with cobalt blue. Cobalt blue can be a little bit stark, so it softens it. So you'll see in a moment.
So it gives that slightly grey effect.
It's a sort of grey effect, yeah.
I think the theory, John, is it will darken any colour without actually changing the colour, whereas other greys will change the colour because they've got blues in them.
Yeah, as opposed to, say, Payne's grey, which I think is a highly dangerous colour.
I'll take that one away then,
Well, it's dangerous if I get hold of it. Now, I've got a vague idea that the castle is going to be there. I've got that in my mind. That's roughly where it's going to be. So I'm now looking at the composition, and I'm talking about composition of tones here. So I'm letting this sort of a soft grey colour work its way up.
Yes.
And with a dry brush, well, dryish, you know, I've just dabbed it in this kitchen paper. I'm softening some of the edges here and just working it into so the sky is taking on a little bit of drama, as you can see. Okay. Now across the other side, I don't want to be as dramatic as that over there, but it needs some. I'm looking at this sort of area of glowing light area of sky. So I'm going to go back to the cobalt here, but with plenty of water.
John, may I ask what weight of paper you use?
Sorry?
What weight of paper you use?
£90 weight. Well, I stretch. I use so much water, as you can see, that even with the heaviest papers, it's gonna buckle. So I would have to stretch it anyway. So I decided that it's the same surface. It's a good tough paper. Arsh is a good tough paper. It'll put up with lots of rough handling, and because of that, the surface is the same if it's stretched. So why pay all that money for heavy paper? And the other thing is that when they are framed, I put hang on. I use barrier paper, white barrier paper, acid-free barrier paper, which you've got to anyway, because the acid in the backing board will eat the painting eventually. So, you know, there's a law issue with that. But that barrier paper behind the painting means that light comes back through the painting, which will give you all the quality of the subtle tones, etc., etc. So that's why I don't spend a fortune on heavy paper.
Is that actually, if you wanted to buy that paper, is it called barrier paper or is it called something else?
I think it's called barrier board, but I buy it from Lion in Birmingham. But, you know, I buy a big carton at a time. I'll let you know. Ask Stal the next time you see it. Okay, so you can see the sky is now developing. I'm going to add even more neutral tint and cobalt and let it do its job. You see it's moving up.
I would have a lot of colour, guys.
See, the paper's cockling now, even though I've stretched it. Imagine if it wasn't held down by staples.
If you were working that your normal way with the board facing you on an angle, you'd be working more from the top and letting it run down, would you?
Yeah, but I would wang it around, you know,
Around.
and and I would be a bit slower than I'm working right now. Certainly, when I say to get the colour to bite into the paper, there is a process. I get quite surprised when I look around some of these painters, which I've seen before, but they're a patch and I think, how the hell did that happen? and it's partly because the paper or the paint over time actually literally bites into the paper, and certainly if it's a rough surface, you'll get those nice edges or whatever. Okay, I'm going to leave that for the sky at the for the moment.
You're not going to do that.
Right, the foreground. I haven't got a clue what the foreground's. What do I do with the sketch? Well, I can see there's a tree to the right. Now, this is a point, you know, you go out sketching. I avoid doing details because one, you sit around for too long, and two, any sort of detail, if you were going to do a watercolour from whatever, for instance, if you were going to do a watercolour from a photograph, the photograph will dictate to you. You can't ignore that the detail is there. You think, oh, I've got to put that in, or I've got to put that in. Blow that, you know. Do a simple, well, in my case, I do a simple sketch. Then I create my atmospherics, and so I'm not bogged down. I'm not dictated to by this thing. All I want to know is that a tree, and that is a line of trees, etc. That's all I need. So, ultramarine. Right, I've got to find the colour first. It's got to be here somewhere. Can't believe it. Oh well. I usually use a bit of sap green, but it hasn't got in. No?
Yeah,
Is it?
I think it is.
Ah, yeah,
Somewhere at the
that's
top,
it.
yeah.
You wouldn't like a job, would you? Right, now this is Naples yellow with a little bit of cadmium yellow. And now ultramarine with a little bit of cadmium yellow. What about So all I'm doing now is varying the mixtures.
Can you tell us something about the brush you use?
I will in a moment. I can't remember where I found it. But I have great trouble in finding these brushes with the length of hair that I want and the amount of water it can carry. Very rarely do I find a brush, and when I do, I hang on to it, as you can see. So it started falling apart, and there's a couple of screws in there, and there's a piece of wire, but it does the job. God knows, you know, I've said this before, other brushes, in fact, I've hung on to, oh, I've not brought it up today, but the previous brush had got down to about that thickness. But it is quite important, actually, if the brush suits what you are doing, then, you know, you've got to look after it. So already, every time we go somewhere, we drop into an art shop, if there's an art shop. And the first thing I go to is the brush stand, see what they've got. So I've got loads of these sort of varnish brushes at home, and none of them work except this one. You probably notice that just about all my painting is done with this. Okay, it looks fairly impressive to have all those, but this is the one that does the job. I'm not worried about detail, as you can see. That'll come later, if there's going to be any detail at all. I'm keeping an eye on the sky there, so as it's developing edges, there'll be some that I want, some I don't want.
When you scrub away at the painting, the paper there, have you ever gone through it?
Is this a positive experience?
Depends what mood I'm in and what shoes I'm wearing at the time. There's many a painting that I've kicked into touch. Now, this is a process of, if you like, applying paint and keeping your options open. And you saw me wipe that away. It's about variation. There's nothing special here yet. But I'm looking at the foundations. Okay, I'm looking at the foundations of the painting and what's going to happen later. I'm keeping my eye on the sky all the time. And when I say that the colour bites into the paper, there's some areas I don't want it to bite into the paper. Right, increasing the strength. I don't want to spell it out. But there's undulating areas with clumps of trees, I suppose. So, okay, so it's starting to take shape a little. Right, a couple of minutes and then I'll have to dry it out. So with just a wet brush, and I'm going to scrub that. So, having dampened that area, the damp is now going to take some colour and do its own thing. So a bit of the remains of the cobalt there. And over this edge, I might just give the idea that there's sort of light cloud, which might look as if it's behind. On the other hand, it might. So it's quite delicate little changes here, which you'll pick up later when you. That's not to say I'm being delicate. You could never say that about a Pontypool forward.
Having been kicked by people from your valley, I agree.
We only kick the best people.
I never thought it was a compliment, so
We're very gentle with most people, John, but now and again we've got to be a little stronger. And I got badly mauled by John Fall and John Lelou. Do you remember them?
oh yeah, I was in school with John Lelou.
Oh, right. Oh. They weren't delicate with me at one.
No, I didn't imagine
What did you do to irritate them?
I don't think I did anything.
What else do you need? I got my own back on John Lelou though, because I played soccer against him once.
Oh, right.
Completely out of his depth on a soccer pitch.
Okay.
I was able to kick him quite freely.
We're talking rugby, by the way.
As if we needed to be done.
Right. Oh, I don't know what's happening there. I'll leave it like that for now. Right, let's have a look at the foreground. So we need to put markers down now. Before I go any further, I establish a stronger sort of foreground shadow. Now there was that big, fairly big tree which right, I've got incidentally a whole range of possibilities there, as you can see, so I'll be dipping in as I want.
That's what restricts us. Little sources of colour. Sorry. That's what restricts us. Yeah, yeah.
Now this tree is going to be all important because in a way it's going to give the sense of distance when I bring the castle in. And
It's the rim that stops the colours. I think. So I've got an idea.
So you see the start. Right, there's that sort of middle distance now, which needs a neutral tint. Incidentally, the other thing with using a board, so many times I've seen people squeezing masses of paint out before they start, you know, 24 colours. Oh, the cost. You know. As you can see, I'm very sparing. You know, why put colour out when you know, before you know what you're going to do? Now, talking about brushes, you see this cheap looking thing? And it must have been, I don't even know who made it or what, but I've used that so much in the last couple of years. You know, can you call it a rigger?
A rigger.
I don't know. It's getting on that way, isn't it? But anyway, it goes, you pick up paint and it sort of goes on forever. So if we have a look at this tree, now I'm not going to any detail yet, I'm just putting markers down. And also I'm bringing in now the very, very darks that is going to establish the range of tones of light. Right, come on. Deep concentration. So, and using cobalt will now, over the top of what I painted before, will sort of give the effect that it's back a bit. I'm intentionally avoiding bringing that paint right down into this area. I'm leaving little touches of white paper. And I think I'm going to make this more dramatic to the one side. I really think it should be more dramatic. Right, the castle's going to be bigger.
We do have a line.
Pardon?
We do have a line where the paint was before. Still wet, I think.
Now, a line of hills. Okay, now while that's biting in, I'll work on some detail down here now. This is where you use up all the paint that's left over from Richard, my next game of golf.
Not the ideal position to be in.
No. Don't put in too much practice now before next year, by the way. We've just discovered that we are both captains of the the old men's sections of the golf clubs that we belong to. And we are playing against each other.
Not old men, veterans.
Yeah.
I'm most surprised that golf has got a young men's section.
Cynic.
Surprised that he's got a normal section. I might just veterans really.
Right, it's drawing. Basically, we're drawing with a brush and paint. And there's nothing more scientific than that. And that's because drawing is the first part of everything, isn't it? In painting, I reckon. Have you noticed that Winsor and Newton, okay, these are the new tubes, Winsor and Newton. So one is ultramarine, the other is cobalt. But you can't tell it. Why don't they colour the tops? Huh? So I wrote to them and complained, and the reply was, "You were not the first one to complain."
Oh, we're not going to take any notice of you either.
Would cost more money.
Yes, ridiculous.
Probably can't sort it out in China.
What happens if you get the tops mixed up?
Yeah.
Good question, yeah.
That'd be interesting thing.
You have exciting paintings.
bit harsh, isn't it? There's a runny bit there which I'd like to keep, but I'm going to have to take it out because we've not got the time. So, a little touch of red here. So, make up my mixture.
What was the neutral you used? Is it neutral?
Neutral tint.
Right.
Sorry?
Oh, neutral tint.
Well, this is cobalt and a bit of red here.
Yes.
Give him more rags kittens. I think it was more than me having kittens.
When you were talking about drawing, you mean drawing with brush?
That's right, yeah, yeah. But of course, some of the watercolor people they actually do use a pen and pick up the mixture in a pen and draw. Yeah. Particularly the boat people, you know, the people who do boats and where all the lines have got to be absolutely spot on. And
What red have you mixed it with?
sorry?
What red have you mixed the cobalt blue with?
Alizarin, I think, yeah. No one reminded me to change the water.
make a good cleaning lady.
Clean one.
Really clean it.
Right, so we are now approaching the final bits and pieces to be done. There is a little line there in the wash which I would like to get rid of, so I'm going to scrub that out. Which will be a surprise to some people because they think that you can't alter anything in a watercolour once it's on the paper. Well, that's not exactly, that's not absolutely true. So as you can see, I've taken that line out. And eased that light area into the slightly darker wash area. And I think that's okay. Right, we're looking at my sketch, and I think I'll need to be a little bit more accurate with the drawing of the castle. So that's my next job. And I'll make the left hand side of the castle a little bit stronger. Give the impression that light is coming from the right. And according to my sketch, I will need to fill in one or two little areas to the right, but not with a strong colour mix, but a slightly lighter one to the one that I've put in on the left. So if I bleed that little bit down there into the previous wash, and I think at that point it's more of a feel of the ruins. Now there's a problem here about whether I've got everything in proportion, so I think I'm going to work on this tree and enlarge it just a little bit. So I'm using sap green with a little mix of neutral tint. I don't want to be too definite about it. I just want to suggest that there's a fairly substantial tree there. Having done that, a little bit more detail in the tree would help, I think. So an idea of branches just a suggestion here and there. I think the proportions look a little bit more convincing. Right, a little bit of cobalt blue to build up a ridge. Before it tumbles down into the valley. So, just a little bit of strengthening of colour here and there now. I want to give the idea that there's sort of broken light in the landscape. It's not going back to the start, remember the atmospherics that I was trying to create. And with that in mind, I'm just going to strengthen the colour in the foreground here. Just little indications of ridges, distant trees. Now I'm going back to the castle itself because there's a line down the left which I need to tidy up. An indication of trees growing up to the side of the hill. So very close to the finish. And I think that's it. Just take out that little bit. And we call it a day.